episode 8 of The Whistleblower. My name is Ian Trent, and joining me today is a fantastic panel of water polo legends. Let's first up meet the Australian Water Polo Referees Director and the former FINA referee from Sydney, Mr. Phil Bauer. Good evening, Phil.
Good evening, Ian.
Are you well? The Roosters are going well, so you're always well.
Yes, mate. Yeah, and we're ready for Melbourne on Thursday night.
Should be a ripper. Now,
yes.
One man that it will be going for Melbourne, not even arguably Australia's top referee. He is Australia's top referee. Certainly its most decorated whistleblower from lockdown deep in Melbourne's, southwest, is it? Southwest?
West. Oh, we go southwest. Yep.
Danny Flav. Hi, Dan.
Good evening, all. How are we?
We're very lucky to have you. If the Maggies were playing tonight, we wouldn't be sitting there with us. So
exactly right. I'd love to have standing, that's for sure.
Now, the former Australian men's team coach and now junior men's coach is coming to us from the nation's capital, Chile, Canberra. Welcome, John Fox.
Good evening, Ian, and fellow panellists. And yeah, looking forward to asking our special guest, Daniel Marsden, tonight a few interesting and tough questions. And well, I think we'll be expecting some honest and informative answers from Daniel.
Very much looking forward to it, Foxy. Finally, a rookie panellist tonight, a media guru and a Balmain stalwart, James Falzon. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. And esteemed panellists. I look forward to being part of it. So be gentle on me as a rookie. Looking forward to it.
You will be fine. Now, our special guest, of course, as Foxy indicated, Daniel Marsden, coming up soon. But first, some notes on communication. Now, during the program, we'd love your questions, audience. And if you have a look at the bottom of your screen, the Q&A box, if you just tap onto that, log in your questions, and we will do our best to answer anything that you bring to us. Also, we love to hear your feedback on the show, whether it's good or bad. Some comments are great. And the address there, whistleblower polo, one word that was, @gmail.com. Please give us some feedback. And our Instagram account is whistleblowerpolo, #whoistwb, the whistleblower. Love to hear from you. Okay, some news around. I did purchase some Delfina masks last week because Tyler Martin's a friend and they look absolutely fantastic. But Phil, they are our show's first sponsor. How good is that?
It's fantastic, Ian. Tyler came on this week and all our guests from now on will be getting a mask. I'll send them out to them. And hopefully we can do a lot of good for Delfina as well. Because, a local Des Moines boy, played for Australia, starting his own business and really going well.
Here you go. I've got mine on now. My Greg Hunt impersonation, I actually got it on. The one thing I'd like to ask Tyler is, if you've got glasses on, how do you stop them from fogging up when you put the mask on? Anyhow, that's...
$1 million question. Minnie?
Apparently there are lots of people with the same problem. Okay, a little bit of news too. A couple of weeks old there. John Hahn is moving into the coaching ranks. I found that pretty interesting. Straight into coaching Des Moines ladies, Phil.
It's very interesting, yeah. Yeah, really different change from Maureen O'Toole. Yeah, and John is also playing, which is going to make it harder and harder for him, but he knows a lot about water polo and he's very keen. And I mean, he's been at Des Moines since the first time he ever swam. So I think he'll be very successful.
Yes, I've coached against him at school level. He's pretty good, and that will be very interesting. All right.
So, Minnie, just quickly, was that on the cards? Has that been on the cards for a while? That just happened?
Don't know the politics behind it. Phil knows all the politics.
I don't know anything that happens at Des Moines.
Well, I think it's a great move that he's coaching. I've seen him coach with some of the younger kids, and he's coached a lot of the young Balmain boys at a school level, and they rave about him. They say he's a fantastic coach. Quite often he's coached with AJ. They kind of coach together, and John's obviously the calmer influence, and AJ brings a little bit of excitement. So I'm not sure if he's going to bring AJ in as the special coach or manager of the girls team, but the guys really have a great rapport with him and say he's a great coach, and I look forward to seeing it. But again, how do you balance that with playing? I think that's going to be a really hard challenge. As a lot of you guys know, it takes a lot of time and effort to coach a National League team, and it's quite hard to balance that with work and with also playing yourself. So I think how he'll manage that will be interesting to kind of see.
Okay, that was Mr. and Mrs. Trent with the Delphina masks on. Susan had a much nicer one on than I had, but everybody just get a hold of Tyler, and he has coached against John Hahn too, and they're terrific mates and they're good blokes, and it should be very interesting. Okay, another little thing that I thought we should mention was the Australian senior team's alumni program. Now, gentlemen, some of you would be involved in that. It involves referees, players, coaches, physios, you name it, anybody who's been involved in an Australian senior team. Acacia Gophers in particular is behind it. Originally, Kathy Parks set something up years and years and years ago, and Acacia's got the ball now, and I think it's a great idea. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. As long as they go forward with it and they organise functions and we actually do something as a group.
Well, that's the idea. So if they don't get the support that it deserves, it's a handy club. It's going to be a big club of people, and it'd be great to see a lot of the old timers back into it as well. I think it's fantastic. Okay, and of course, Danny, they've included referees, which is good.
Very good. Yep. We don't feel like we're being left out anymore. It's great.
Okay, it's game time now, and we're going to now check out. We've got 6 video clips for Danny and Phil in particular to have a look at and highlight exclusions away from the ball. Gentlemen, the court is yours. Bill, what are we looking at?
Okay, centre forward, centre back. Okay, the centre back who's fronting, you can see her hands down, holding the centre forward, and the centre forwards just moved backwards, and there was an exclusion there, and they passed the ball in straight away, and she scored the goal. So you can see her here holding with that left hand holding down. So she's actually impeding the centre forward all the time there. Kicked out there, excluded there, quick pass in, goal. So what they're saying. Also, there's a lot of talk about the quick pass in is not allowed anymore. The quick pass is still allowed as long as there's no confusion who's being kicked out. And in this scenario, here, everyone knew it was the centre back being kicked out, so there's no problems passing the ball in for the quick shot.
Danny, what would happen if there was confusion?
Okay, if there was confusion, what the referee is supposed to do is stop the game, pull the ball out. Okay, just to settle it all down, and then so the right person is excluded, all players know what's going on, put the ball back in, and they still have the extra person.
So they're allowed to take the throw straight away, Danny. The referee doesn't have to signal the table before they can take the throw?
What the TWPC would like, what FINA would like, would be for the referee to signal to the player, so the players know pretty much straight away who's excluded, and once we show the player the excluded number, then we can show the bench. So to show the table. As long as we do show the table at some stage, they know who's excluded, but they're more worried now about the player knowing or which player is being excluded. So we work on the player first to make sure they know, then we show the table.
Can you make a point, Danny, about when they're showing the table, the referee is showing the table, that they actually keep watching the play? I've seen many referees actually turn and look at the table.
So what they would like to happen is for the referee to continue watching the play and just to put their hands to the side of where the table is. So the referee is still watching the game, but signalling the table. Because as we all know, if the referee turns away, players watch it, and that's when something happens. So the referee must always watch the play while signalling to the table.
And the duty of the backcourt referee to signal as well.
Yeah, the duty of the referee is also, as soon as the attacking referee or whoever calls it the exclusion and the other one notice it, they both do it to each other. So we both have the correct number. And once we've done that, then we show it to the table. The reason we show the referees do it to each other is so there is no confusion.
Danny, on the screen that we're looking at,
Yep.
it's got, oh, sorry if we go back, it's got correct exclusion, but pass was a bit quick. So you're saying if the team is too quick to make that pass, the ball will be taken back and the player will be excluded?
So what the TWCs have changed again. So what we went from first was you could do the quick 1-2 and that was fine. Then they brought it back to, we wanted to slow it down. So we signal the players, then we signal the table, and then we signal play on. Okay. Now that virtually takes the advantage away for the old 1-2. So what they're saying is as long as the players know who's excluded, the quick 1-2 can happen.
Okay, so ignore that writing at the bottom there.
Pretty much so. Yeah. Yeah. So what they're saying, that's only an interpretation of what they're saying. Oh, that may have been too quick. But everyone knew what was going on in that situation. So we just play on.
Right.
I've got a quick question for Foxy on that one. I know we're talking about the rules and interpretations there, but what's the centre back doing there? Why are they coming around from the front when you've got a zone coming from that side? Shouldn't the centre back be slipping back with the defender coming back? Shouldn't they be slipping back around? They shouldn't be coming around the front in the first place.
You'll find quite a few teams now actually press the centre forward in a zone to cut that pass out. So it's just something that's been creeping in over the last couple of years, and it does work for some teams.
Yeah.
Thing about it, James, is that the centre back can't readjust, so it's only one spot there that it looks a bit strange, but the rest of it they're going okay. So that was just my thought. But anyhow, let's go on to segment number 2. Thank you, Mr. Magic. Here it is.
Okay, once again, ball out top. You can see the centre back actually holding the centre forward under with his left arm, pushing down his shoulder. As you can see, you'll see as he turns around. Once again, there it is there, holding him under, impeding, okay, excluded. And what happens then, again, they all knew that it was the centre back that was excluded. So they allowed the pass, the quick 1-2 in. Unfortunately, the attacking player missed a goal. Play on. I think that one was pretty obvious.
Pretty straightforward, guys.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, once again, centre backs. It should have, for me, it should have been excluded, 1 or 2 seconds earlier. As you can, thanks, Scotty. We'll show it again here. All right, got his hands down. He's all over his back. He's, impeding him, sinking him, 2 hands over. Okay, centre forward's got his hands up. Exclusion all the time. And we can't be referees. We can't be afraid not to call those exclusions off the ball. Once again, everyone knew it was a centre back.
Pass is good. Okay, here's number 4.
Okay, I haven't seen this one. Show it again. Okay, once again, centre forwards had inside water. The defender had both hands down and was also on his back. So straight away, an exclusion. Scotty, can we show that one again? Because when the defender was actually swimming out, he knew he was excluded. He put both hands up. For me, that should have been a penalty straight away, right there. Okay, so he's sort of being smart. He's sure showing the referee that he's not holding, but he's actually, there you go, he's actually blocked that attacker from scoring the goal. The referee actually said, stop, slowed it down, and then called play on. For me, in that situation, that should have been called a penalty.
But would you have stopped the game, Danny, or should he have been allowed to shoot?
Well, for me as refereeing, I would have called a penalty, but because that referee didn't call the penalty and that guy was in the way, he stopped the game, just said, okay, settle it down, and now we start again. I think it was just a knee-jerk reaction from the referee. He should have let it go, and then if that attacking player had a shot and it hit the defender, it's a penalty anyway, because he should have moved out the way.
So Daniel, he didn't have much scope to move out of the way, did he really?
Well, he could have ducked under the water. No, he could have swam the other way, back out through the field of play and right around. So, it's up to the defender to get out of the way of the attacking players. And he didn't do it. He had plenty of time, he was smart and he got away with it. So, but, 90% of the 95% of the time, I think that would have been called a penalty.
All right. Number 5.
Okay, that one was really obvious on the left-hand catch. The defender was just manhandling, just sinking in right there, sinking in, not even knowing where the ball is or the player what was going on. Exclusion all the time. Once again, quick pass in because the guy was outside the 6 metre mark. Quick pass in, shot, goal. Good example of the quick 1-2. And the instructions from TWPC now is, virtually any holding on the perimeter is going to be an exclusion. The attacking player is trying to work. He's doing a lot of work. He knows what's going on, knows where the ball is. The defender had no idea and just was a 2 hands hold, sinking, instructions, you're gone. And once again, everyone knew it was him who was excluded. The quick 1-2, goal was scored.
Okay, here's, I believe, our number 6 and last.
Okay, this is a very good video if we can watch it again to talk through it. Okay, once again the centre forward, centre backs trying to front, holding the cross pass straight across in front. Okay, now that attacker, they've called play on in that situation, but realistically, that under the new rules, that's a penalty, and that was at last year's Worlds, so should have been a penalty. So quick pass in, the girl has a shot, hits a crossbar, falls in front of the other attacking player, and if we let it go a bit further, she's fouled there, that's a penalty. Unfortunately, the referee didn't call it. We don't know why, but there was the quick pass in, shot, ball lands in front of the attacking player, in front of goals, fouled from behind. That should have been a penalty.
Yeah, that's been a penalty for the last 10 years, hasn't it?
Yeah.
So even under the old rules, that was a penalty. Okay.
So in all those things, we just got to be, as referees, we don't need to worry about if we call the foul off the ball, it's going to be 100% it's going to be a goal. But if the attacking players earned the exclusion, then we must pay it, no matter what.
All right. Any other comments, gentlemen? No, we're good. That takes us out for our rules and video segment, and all the videos work this week. Fantastic, boys. Okay, it's time now for our special guest. He's a former Australian men's team captain. He's represented Australia in Olympic Games, World Championships, you name it. He's been there. He's represented New South Wales. He has represented nearly every club in the National League. A journeyman. I did have the pleasure of coaching him in under 16s or under 18s, whatever that was, many years ago, and that was a lot of fun. But our special guest is Daniel Marsden, coming to us from Newcastle. Welcome, Daniel.
Thanks, Minnie. It's good to be here.
Fantastic to have you. Okay, let's go straight into it, eh? Where did it all start for Daniel Marsden regarding water polo? How did you get into the game?
I actually started playing at school. My older brother was playing at Des Moines Boys High, and when I started in Year 7, actually the first couple of weeks they had trials for New South Wales CHS, the regional team. So because he was playing, we ended up going down to Balmain Baths, purely because the advice that we got was that if you wanted to have a some longevity and a career with and end up playing at a higher level, Balmain was a better choice than Des Moines, because Des Moines only had a pretty much a social club back in those days. So
It is. It is.
So that was the decision, because we enjoyed playing it and we wanted to play it a bit more outside of school. We ended up down at Dorney Baths, which was absolutely wonderful.
Okay, Phil?
Phil's got his mute, I think.
You got to turn yourself on, Phil.
I apologise. Your biggest influence coming up, Daniel? So, from those sort of under 18s.
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate because as I said, I started playing at Des Moines. I went to the trials when I first went to Year 7. So, and I was a goalkeeper back in the days, and I only went to the trials to watch. So one of the regions, the Manly region, didn't have a goalkeeper, so I ended up getting thrown in goals. So I was only 13 at the time, I think, and played, and the Manly team was quite good. So I played in goals for those guys, and we did quite well. I think we won the little trial championship thing that they had, and then they wanted to select me in the CHS squad, and then they found out I was still in Year 7 and only 13 years old. So they sort of said, "Oh, you're a bit young," but that sort of springboarded me into a number of different areas. So I had some wonderful coaches at Balmain, obviously yourself included, Phil. My first coach at Balmain was a guy who you would remember, Phil, Kevin Fender, and Kevin Fender was a nuggety left-hander, Garbo, back in the old days of the Garbos, when they picked up the big steel bins and emptied them. So he was a fairly nuggety, strong sort of a bloke, and he was wonderful. He couldn't say a sentence without swearing, which was perfect for us. And he looked after us. So we started in 6th grade, and Kevin said something to me one day which I turned around back on him, and it stayed with me forever. He used to tell us not to get our ability mixed up with our ambition, and I turned around and said to him, "Mate, I'll never let my ability stop my ambition." And sure enough, when I realised being in goals and getting balls thrown at you at 100 miles an hour wasn't doing it for me, I started playing out in the field. And again, that happened at a CHS tournament. I made my first schoolboys tournament as a goalkeeper with Guy Newman. Guy Newman was the number 2 and I was the number 1 goalkeeper. As you all know, Guy went on to play with us in the 92 Olympic Games. So, he was no slouch. And I got annoyed because we weren't scoring enough goals. And the coach said, "Why don't you go out there and show us how it's done?" So me being me, I did, and scored a number of goals. And then they said, "Okay, well, how about you stay out in the field and we'll put Guy in goals." And that's history shows the rest, I guess.
So you were a very handy young player, I recall. Were you getting, right at the start of it, were you getting used to playing underage against overage kids? Did you do that a lot? Because I remember that team that we had, you were younger than everybody.
Yeah. That's how water polo used to be. As I said, you started in a grade at your level. So Balmain 6th grade was pretty much all the young Balmain guys, and our coach and mentor was Kevin. We used to call him Kevin Bloody Fender because that was his favourite word, bloody. yeah, so he looked after us, in and around the water, and gave us some wonderful guidance in doing so. So that and again, back in the day, there was schoolboys and under 21s. That's all. That's the only sort of junior representation you had. So you're always playing against, well, I was always playing against back when I first started against older players. So that team that we went away with you, Minnie, which mind you, we won the national championships with.
You recall that?
Under fantastic guidance. Yeah, for sure. I was 15, I think. And the majority of the guys in the team were all around 20.
Dan, who else played in that team, Dan?
Some great players. Jeff Clark, guys like
Lance.
Lance Goldsmith from Balmain was in the team.
Lance still looking pretty buff nowadays.
Yeah. There were some great back in the day. There were some great players that came out of schools water polo. A guy called Andrew Manners from Manly was a big strong centre forward who came out of there.
Troy, the boy from Newcastle.
Yeah, I mean the team was actually the variety of clubs and areas that the team was made up on was incredible. There were guys from Tamworth, Central Coast, inland. So it was quite amazing. I also remember falling out of the bus, Minnie, before the grand final.
Yes, and yeah, I'd actually, the bus door was open. We went round a corner in the car park, which was just grass and whatever. I don't know how you did that, Daniel. How did that happen?
Yeah, well, again, me being young and adventurous as I've always been, we decided to have a water bomb fight in the car park between the two buses. So we were throwing water bombs out the door at the other bus, and I sat down, and just as I think Andrew Manners was driving, Andrew went round the corner, so I went to sit down, then end up out the door doing a commando roll in the dirt. So
didn't do you any good either. I think you were in a bit of doubt for that grand final, weren't you?
Not really. The doubt was trying to find someone to stitch me up at that time of night, which we did, and then some antibiotics and a bit of tape over the elbow. I mean, we weren't going very fast, mind you. So all those mums and dads out there listening and kids, it was in the car park, and we would have been doing about 5 kilometres an hour. So I didn't come out at speed, but when I did come out, I was going too fast to actually get my legs underneath me, so I did commando rolled in the dirt.
That sounds like a pretty incredible festival of water polo when you've got sort of those age groups sort of all playing together in a national championships. Is there a place for that now? Should we be doing something like that now? Like obviously the youth tournament at the moment is fantastic for the younger age groups, but is there a place for something like a national state championships now?
For seniors?
Yeah, for seniors.
Actually,
from sort of that 18s, 20s and opens.
I think there is. My view on the pathway is, has been that there's too much emphasis on the junior development as part of the pathway, which has really watered down the actual club grade part of the sport. My belief is that junior participation and in a sense a lot of the senior participation at that level should be tournament based. Yeah. So you shouldn't be playing week in, week out as an age group or outside a club as in a regular competition in that sense, because if you want to be successful at the elite level, you've got to perform in a tournament. That's it. You got 2 weeks to put everything out there and be successful. And unfortunately, we moved away from a lot of that sort of tournament-based stuff. And so, when you lose by a goal to teams at critical times, a lot of it's because, you just haven't had that pressure and that experience enough.
Danny, we had Aaron Younger on about a month ago now, and he pretty much indicated exactly what you just said about getting match play and the daily training environment. We talked extensively about that. And so how would you see, without actually having to move overseas. And that's another question that I'd like to ask you, because you were obviously good enough to play overseas, but you elected not to, and you went to the AIS. So how would you see us getting that valuable game time and match practice? And do you think the AIS could still play a role in player development?
There's a number of parts to that question, Foxy. The first thing is, again, we need to change I believe our competition pathway and structure, so that the prestige in what we do is brought back, and how we do it. And that comes down to something I said many years ago now, about 15 years ago at the last national conference that I went to. And again, people just didn't want to listen to it. You can only compete at the level you want to if there's a critical mass of players at that level. So to get the required, I guess, exposure, one to the type of event you want to be successful in, and two, at the player and physical level that you need to get it at. You can't have a tournament or a competition where that's diluted. And back when we first started talking about that, we probably had 120 athletes who you would say were at that level. I don't think these days you're anywhere near that, which means the number of teams that you could have in a competition at the level you need to be competing at would be far less. So it's a difficult situation in regards to the AIS. And I think it's the same with all institutes and academies. They were originally instigated to fill the gaps in what sports and in our sport the clubs were doing. Most clubs would have trained three. Some of the clubs that had a lot of national team guys that pushed and trained 4 or 5 times a week. But again, that's nowhere near enough to be competitive at an international level. So these institutes and academies were set up to help provide the environment to fill the gap that clubs weren't providing. Unfortunately, over the years, that's completely been turned on its head, and they're a beast of their own, and don't actually, I think, achieve what they sort of set out to do. The AIS, I think there definitely is room for centralised programs. It's very difficult, and actually, I think last night John Coates was on a show on the ABC, and he had a bit of a dig about the AIS and mentioned water polo, and I didn't quite catch it, so I'll have to have a chat to him next time I see him. But the AIS was a phenomenal environment where you could actually train, study, or work in an environment that actually assisted you. I know players today, and I've got 3 of them who live with me, who find it extremely difficult to get the time and the ability to get to everything they need to get to, i.e. study, work, and training commitment. There definitely is a place for centralised programs.
So Daniel, Foxy sort of touched base on a little bit about not playing overseas, that you elected not to. Was there a reason you didn't want to go, mate, or it just didn't fit in with what you're doing at home?
I had many offers to play all around the world, in Italy, Greece, France. When I was younger, I was approached by Terry Schroeder to go to Pepperdine University, where Jeff Clark had gone a couple of years before me to play. I didn't see the need. My belief's always been, we have phenomenal talent in Australia. I did have the luxury of the AIS, so I had a perfect training environment as it was. But I also thought that the benefit of training and playing together day in, day out makes a massive difference internationally. So the offers were there for sure. I nearly took an offer to Greece. There was a ridiculous offer that was made to me to go and play in Greece, actually for Crete of all places, which would have been magnificent.
It's a lovely place.
Yeah, lace around on the island of Crete and play water polo. It just coincided with the birth of my first son Mitchell, and the club team back here in Australia, asked me what I needed to stay instead of going, and the offer was good enough. Plus, I just started my career, so I always had a whole lot of things in the back of my mind. I didn't want to be one of those players that went overseas, didn't have any academic backing behind him when he finished, or had no real career or career prospects. So I just started a really good job in Canberra with the Australian Sports Commission, and I thought, I'm probably better off staying. And I didn't believe it would make any difference to my water polo.
And of course, you would not have met your lovely wife if you weren't at the AIS.
Yeah, well, that's correct. Again, I tend to do a lot of things while I was young. I met my beautiful wife Vanessa at the age of 19 at the AIS. Vanessa was a swimmer, and obviously we crossed paths nearly every day, a couple of times a day. So yeah, you're 100% correct, John. If I had gone away to the US, for example, and over to Pepperdine, my life would be completely different today. So I have no regrets whatsoever.
Daniel, you mentioned before about maybe change up to our sort of elite competition level. I would have thought that in this current environment with the COVID restrictions and the shorter seasons, and next year no one quite knowing what happened, I would have thought that would have been a perfect time to try something different with the National League or AWL or whatever it's going to be called sort of in the future. What changes would have you liked to have seen made to our elite competition?
I think I've been on this bandwagon for about 15 to 20 years now. As I said, it's difficult because if a club doesn't have a team in their elite competition, they lose their elite players, right? Which takes away from the club's ability to develop younger players and the prestige for the club and all those sort of things. So having a league that has all the major club teams in the country makes it very difficult to field quality teams across the board. So my belief was, and it has been for a long time now, you need to bring back the Australian Club Championship style of tournament, where it's 1 week or a week and a bit early in the year, where clubs can go and compete and make them, and prove themselves as the best club in Australia. The cost to do it is a whole lot less for clubs. The ability to attract international players, and I'm talking about marquee international players, not USA B team players, which, the USA B teams never existed, but they all seem to have played for it. You can, because of the time of year in January where it used to be, you can attract some quality players internationally to come out and be a part, especially for club teams like in the Hunter now. We find it very difficult to raise the money every year, let alone bring in imports and have to pay for them and house them and all those sorts of things. So it provides an avenue for a club like Hunter to bring someone in for a couple of weeks, maybe a week before, to do a bit of training and then head down to Canberra or wherever the tournament may be and compete for a week, and then you get the bonus of having that talent as part of your squad. All these players in your team and the other teams you play against get exposed to it. So I think it's a good model for clubs. It also brings back the prestige, which means your state competitions are critical for your ranking to be seeded in that tournament. So in New South Wales, you don't want to finish fourth because it means you'll be put in more than likely in with the top New South Wales team or the top West Australian team or the top Victorian team, and vice versa for those states. Finishing second in WA means you get a much harder draw, or finishing third or fourth means you get a much harder draw. Victoria, same deal. Queensland, same deal. So it means that it would hopefully bring back a lot of prestige to those state level competitions. And that then flows down to what I experienced when I was a kid. You know, our goal wasn't to make a National League team. Our goal was to make 5th grade and then 4th grade, then 3rd grade, you know, and one day hopefully, you know, make 1st grade. If you're lucky enough to have some representative experiences along the way, that was fantastic, you know. But realistically, your club polo was the most prestigious thing you could play. You know, those games we had, you know, at Gunnamatta Bay and down at Dorney Bars, where you'd have all 6 men's grades and the top 4 women's grades play, started at 9 o'clock in the morning and finished at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, were just incredible.
And then how does that's great for the clubs. How do you see that then growing the sport even further?
Well, I guess it puts the focus back on the clubs and the clubs' ability to, because they're the people on the ground that find the players and develop them. To expect you know, a state association or an institute academy to do those things is never gonna work. It's too hard, and it generally takes away from what the clubs are trying to achieve. Obviously, once, you know, there needs to be a level above, you know, that club championship level, which then represents your critical mass of players who you know you believe are at an international level. So you need a premier type league that continues on after that tournament, and that can be shadowed by a development league. You know, so you could have it in the men and under 23 league, because obviously a lot of those junior and younger players, you know, wouldn't you know be good enough necessarily, you know, at 18, 19, 20, even through to 22, 23. To make those teams. So you need still something there for those players to aspire to and you know, and keep them motivated. The women, obviously, you would have a younger age division because women naturally obviously mature at a much younger age. Yeah, and that would give you, and I mean, the structure of that would need to be flashed out, but it needs to be more tournament style. So you go away and play a number of games, which is what the National League used to be. I remember back in the day, we used to play 5 and 6 games on the weekend. So it was tough, it was hard, and you had to perform in all those games to make sure, you know, you qualified through. So I think it was more sort of tournament based, you know, but continuous across until the international season started. I think you'd have a pretty fantastic mix. But it also gives you the opportunity to attract teams from overseas as well, international teams.
Yeah, it does, and that's also marketable. You can sell that to a network. You can sell that to actually put that elite comp. You put that on TV. You generate interest around that. That's where you get your big media support as well.
Yeah, 100%. You know, and that was, I think, Andrew Murray from Drummoyne, who's a great mate of mine. We actually put together a proposal probably over 20 years ago, which sort of represented that idea. And through contacts of Andrews and other people, you know, we already had interest from Fox and some of those other networks, you know, because we believe that countries like Japan would be keen, you know, even countries like Singapore, New Zealand, we're all keen, and they're all teams who over the years have played in our National League. You know, Canada, I nearly guarantee that the Americans, you know, they struggle for all those players who are outside their collegiate system. You know, they could easily be a part of this sort of a structure.
Daniel, you made good on your education, and you mentioned that you worked at the Australian Sports Commission, and then you went on to become General Manager of Unisport Australia. Is that General Manager? Is that the correct term?
Oh, it was a Chief Executive Officer. So in the same sense, yeah. So
yeah. So and my question, and I remember when you were working with them, you did talk about the possibility of a National League set up funded by the universities, and given the current climate and some clubs struggling, are you still have you still got that mindset that it could be university funded National League?
Most definitely, it could be a source of funding, a major source of funding. Universities have millions and millions of dollars in marketing budgets and promotional budgets, and if the competition lent itself, especially if there was international teams involved as well, then the opportunity for them to promote the university on an international scale, especially in Asia, is a big ticket item for universities. And I think, that it wouldn't be too hard to attract 5 or 6 universities to come on board and be a part of this. I mean, we already have a lot of those universities involved in some of the clubs now. Obviously, you wouldn't want to take that funding away from the clubs. It would have to be a separate sort of program, but most definitely, yeah, 100%.
So Daniel, just a bit of a change of subject. Many sort of mentioned it earlier on the promo about you're a bit of a journeyman and you've played for a lot of National League clubs and coached. How many of you actually played for, coached? And would you say there's one that you really enjoyed more than the other, or would that be too hard to say?
I mean, I've always enjoyed my water polo no matter where I was. And unfortunately, when the National League first started, Balmain didn't have a team. So I played for Canberra. Well, actually, for the RAS back in the original East Coast Challenge or whatever it used to be called. Yeah. And then Canberra had a team. So I played for Canberra. I played for Canberra for, I think, 4 or 8 years maybe. And then got poached across to play for Sydney Uni. I played for well, actually, I then got approached by Melbourne Barbarians.
Yes.
And here's the irony. The first season that I was going to go down and play for Melbourne Barbarians, they pulled out of the competition. And because they pulled out of the competition, they said none of the players could play in the National League. Yeah. And I said, well, how's that affect me? Because I've never played for them. Yeah. I've got nothing to do with them other than the fact that I was going to play this year. And they said, oh, well, you nominated for them, so you can't play. And I was, so, I just shake my head. But yes, I never actually got to play a game for the Melbourne Barbarians. And I ended up in Queensland. I actually played for Victoria in the national championships. Yeah. But never got to play National League down in Victoria. And then I moved up to as John said, to Brisbane because I took on the role as CEO of Australian University Sport. And so the first year I got up there, I got asked to coach by a number of the guys that I grew up playing with, who were then playing with the Barracudas. So I agreed, and we had a very successful year. We actually won the National League. It was the first time a Queensland senior men's team has ever won a national championship, so it was quite special. And then I sort of, again, the player situation became an issue because there were 2 teams up there, and there weren't the critical mass of players to actually to fill 2 good teams. There was end up being a move towards trying to get the best players to play together. So I started playing again, initially with the Barracudas because we just didn't have the people. I even had Phil Howden and Lance Johnson ugly in the water at stages because we didn't have the players, which again was ended up being quite spectacular for Phil and his son Reese, who was obviously an absolutely wonderful player because they got to play together in the National League and they got to score a goal. They both got to score a goal in the National League when they played, which I know is extremely special because I've had the same opportunity to play with my kids and be in a game where we all scored and those sorts of things.
Daniel, we're running out of time, so we're going to move on a little bit. First Olympics is 1992.
Correct.
And you had a great result then. When did you first come into the Australian time and run us through very quickly from 9 to when you first came into the Australian team to when you played your last national games, which I think is 2007. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, well, I was actually, my first official Australian team was 89, went away to the World Cup in 1989. And then I played right through to 2000, where I resigned from the team. I had to get a couple of operations to put my body back together, but I sat out for a couple of years and then got motivated again when the World Championships were were given to Melbourne in 2007. So I came back at the sprightly age of 36 and made the team to play in the World Championships in 2007.
Tell us about 1992. 5th place.
Yeah, your first Olympic Games is it's like deer in the headlights sort of stuff. It's you're not quite sure what to expect, and we had a number of players who had been to Olympic Games before, and we had a really good shot at doing well. Unfortunately, the game against the CIS, I think, was one of our critical games that we needed to win, which unfortunately we didn't. And our first game against the Americans, we lost by a goal, so it put us out of the top 4. But we still had a good chance to get a great result, and we ended up having to play Hungary in the game for 5th and 6th, and yeah, had a wonderful result. Scored the winning goal with I think it was about 20 seconds to go in the game, and held their last attack out, and celebrated accordingly.
Yeah, we've heard about 96 previously from, I think it was Foxy. Do you want to add anything there, or that we get straight on to 2000 where you captained the team? And everyone's going to ask you about the hairdo there.
Okay, just briefly on 90 was probably the most disappointing time for anyone who was involved in the program. We had a fantastic team. The environment that we went, that was, I guess, was created when we went to the qualifying tournament probably wasn't fantastic, and it hurt us. We had our 2 left-handers, Jeff Clark and Paul Whiteman, were sick in our game against the Greeks, who we should have beaten quite convincingly. We lost, which then put pressure on us to beat Romania, and the Romanians came out with nothing to lose, and it was devastating to lose that game by a goal, which put us out of the Olympic Games. There's a whole lot of things around that which may not have been the best decisions by people outside of the control of the players, but in the end it was a really bitter lesson, which meant we for most of us we had to go another 4 years. So I know players at the moment would be feeling probably a similar kind of dread that if the games don't go on next year, then some of them may not get their chance, and others may have to put another 3 years of work in to get to their next Olympic Games. So when we got to Sydney, it was magnificent. The majority of the team sort of stayed together, and the build up before that was brilliant, because World Cup, we had World Cup, World Championships all in Australia leading into it. So it was fantastic for our family and friends to come and see us play at that level, and being made the captain, I think was just the icing on the cake. Very special, very privileged, and and a wonderful Olympic Games. Unfortunately, the result wasn't what we would have wanted it to be. When we continue to lose games by a goal, and there's, my belief is the reason for that is we've never had the people around the team who believed that they, as most of us players believe, that we could win, which always really gave me the shits. When you had Australian officials who would put all these other European teams up on a pedestal, and have this belief that for some reason we weren't as good. My belief has always been we're actually as good, if not better, than the teams that we were competing against. We just needed the leadership, I guess, to instill the belief. I certainly had it, and a number of other players had it when they played. But you're only as good as your weakest link, and when people are constantly being told they're not good enough, or they're doing things incorrectly and putting all these other teams up on a pedestal. When that critical goal you have to score comes up, that little voice in the back of people's heads says, I can't do it. And they don't. Whereas, the Europeans always believe that they can beat anybody. So, generally they'll score that goal and we don't. And that's the saddest thing, I guess, about, Australian teams in my experience.
Do you want to comment about the haircut?
The haircuts, even as a kid, I loved.
You did say haircuts, didn't you?
Yeah, haircuts.
Yeah. Okay.
Sydney wasn't my first. I'd saved the shark fin mohawk for nearly a decade because when it was announced in '93 that it was going to be in Sydney, I thought, I'll do something special with that. And I had always known about my shark fin mohawk, but the '92 Barcelona Olympic Games, I had a flat top with a map of Australia carved out the back.
Yep.
I had my head shaved with a boxing kangaroo on the back of my head. I think that was the '98 World Championships in Perth, which their photo actually made the New York Times. Actually the LA Times, because a Polo mate of mine sent me a copy. But I've had all sorts of different mohawks and funny coloured hair and everything else. But the shark fin mohawk, obviously the men's team's called the Sharks. It's quite an intimidating sort of look, which was part of my persona, I guess, when I played. I always played hard and tough, and I think a lot of the opposition thought I was a bit mad, which tended to work in my favour in a lot of situations. I used to actually to warm up my shoulders, because my shoulders were always a bit dodgy. I used to get the focus mitts out with our team doctor or masseuse or whatever, and box on the side of the pool before training and things. And I used to look across and go, hey, what's he doing? Is he going to get in there and start a fight or what? So it was, yeah. But haircuts, I always love doing something funny, something special.
Danny, I remember the Barcelona Olympics. You actually appeared on the back page of the Herald Sun with your shaved head. So just to move on to the refs, and I've had the privilege of being a delegate and you being a coach of one of the teams over the last couple of years at the AWL, and we've had some robust discussions at the end of games. Tell us about your opinion of the Australian referees, and I suppose what makes you frustrated with some of the refereeing that you encounter in the National League.
I guess the frustrating thing for me, and it's why I stopped coaching a few years ago. The rules are fairly simple, and they're black and white. And for some reason, and we always talk about these interpretations, like in the start of the show, the quick pass to the centre forward on the off the ball exclusion. There's no rule that says you can't pass him the ball or her the ball. I understand if there's some confusion on who's kicked out, but that's just part of refereeing. But to actually mention that, and it blows me away that some of these interpretations aren't even in the rules, and they actually don't referee to the rules. They actually change the rule because of some interpretation. I've never seen a set of interpretations. Now, supposedly FINA puts out, or the TWP puts out a set of interpretations. I've asked for it dozens of times. Never seen a copy of so-called interpretations. The only thing you interpret is the action in the game, and whether or not that's contravened one of the rules. That's all you ever have to interpret as a referee. So the frustration, I guess, is, and a lot of the time it's not the referees, it's outside influences make the referees referee in a certain way, which makes it then very difficult to coach. And I know a number of years ago that the game was so heavy, especially on the perimeter, that you actually couldn't coach players to play the game properly. And I was never ever going to coach players to play in that regard, because it was never going to make them better players. And I know when you get to an international level, and everyone who's been at that or refereed at that level knows, when you get to a FINA event, regardless of what anyone says during the year, they referee to the rules. exactly to the rules. So I guess in my mind, we need to put as much effort we do into junior player development as we do into referee development. And I made a suggestion when I was a delegate 4 or 5 years ago that we actually put away some money to put in place a structure to bring through referees, give them a pathway, because I'm not afraid to say it. In Australian refereeing, there's always been a bit of a closed shop. So anyone who was coming through and wanted to actually have a pathway sort of hit a ceiling because there was a hierarchy. You know, older referees who'd been around, you know, were waiting their turn, and you know, sorry, young fella or young girl, you have to wait your turn before you get a chance. To me, that's ridiculous. It's like anything. If you're good enough, then you should be there. And I think if you can change that culture, bring in a proper pathway that rewards referees, just like you know, there's a pathway for players and coaches to a lesser extent, I guess. Then I think we'll have a much better system. We'll have more referees, which is always tough, and hopefully we'll have a better quality of referee.
That sounds fantastic, mate. But unfortunately, we're always been told, you know, for the last 5-10 years, the Referees Association has always been told there's no money in the budget to send referees to, you know, do training camps, to go interstate and referee better games. So it's always the money, Daniel.
I understand, but I suggested that Australian Water Polo go to the clubs and say, can you raise another $5,000 each club, each team? You know, and anyone who wants to complain about a referee should put their money where their mouth is. So
absolutely,
you know, there you would have had you know, some reasonable funds to do something, but no one wanted to ask the question. And I canvassed a lot of the coaches and said, you know, is this a good idea? And to a person, they said yes. You know.
Well, by doing that, Daniel, can only improve the referees, and then can only improve the standard of the game.
100%.
So it's a no-brainer, isn't it?
It is, mate.
If it only happens. So Daniel, going on that, do you rate the Australian referees with the European referees? Because you said before that, you know, like the people were bagging the Australian team because they thought the European were much better when they weren't. So we have the same sort of scenario that, you know, a lot of people think the European referees are better than the Australian referees. In your mind, what do you think?
No, I completely disagree. Australia probably has, you know, 10 or 12 referees who are all good enough to referee at an international level. Unfortunately, because I think there's all this chatter around how they should referee, instead of just saying, hey, we want you to be as technical as possible and referee to the rules, that they tend to be inconsistent, you know, because you're constantly getting a different view from different people, because, you know, someone wants to interpret a rule. You don't interpret the rules, you interpret the play. The rules are black and white. You know, I'll give you an example. The rule that you can't foul someone in the defensive half,
back half,
mate, in the back half, it's still a rule, right? How often do you see it happen and no one kicks them out? You know, like, you don't need to interpret that. The rule is there, and the way I understand why the rule would be there is to increase the speed of the game and the ball up to the other end. Yes. Pretty simple. Yep. Can't foul exclusion. Yep. But we get told, oh no, but the interpretation. No, there's no interpretation. You know what I mean? Yep. It's the rule. Play it, because when you go to a FINA international event and you foul in the back half, you're excluded
straight away. Absolutely.
See you later. Doesn't matter where it is, how it is. You make a foul. See you later. Yep. You know. So I guess it's about, you know, having that single voice that reflects the way we want our players to react to the rules. Don't worry about what Europe's doing. You know, I got told my whole career, oh, it's heavier in Europe. No, it's not heavier. You know, in international events, it looks more physical, but the technique is more correct. So, you know, the rules haven't changed. You know, so you don't bring in an interpretation so people can lay over each other you know, and hold on the perimeter and those sort of things. It's just ridiculous,
Yeah.
you know. So
Yep, totally agree. No, go on.
Okay, so how can we get more referees into the system with that ability? Obviously, you're going to say former players, correct?
Oh, I think that's one avenue for sure. But I still think that you need to create a proper pathway. So you need to be scouting players at the, you know, under 18s, under 20 tournaments who you know are reasonable players, but they may never get to the level, you know, of a senior national team, and approach them with a view that, hey, we've got this pathway in place that we'll give you proper guidance. We'll pay for your participation at certain events, and over a 2-year period, try and educate these young people to be referees. And if you do that every year, and you can sort of try and grab a half a dozen to a dozen people every year, I guarantee you, within a short period of time, you're probably going to have a dozen or more, you know, fairly, you know, capable young referees who, you know, in 10 years' time, can all be world class. And then if that, you know, that then gives you the momentum to continue that, you know, into the ages. I don't think it's a big task or big ask. You know, the amount of time that I know that the coaching directors like Phil put into trying to improve what the referees do is huge. And if that time can be channeled into a proper system and structure, I think the results we would get would be fantastic. And, you know, and unfortunately for the old referees who have been around for a long time, they may not get to where they want to go. That's just how it is. The same with players, mate. You know, as I said, there's about 40 Australian senior players, men and women, who might not go to an Olympic Games because, you know, of one reason or another with this COVID stuff. So it's tragic, but that's life.
Yeah, I think that's what you're saying, Daniel, is fair. Go on, Phil.
Okay, Daniel, I agree wholeheartedly with what you said, but we need the coaches to be on board with this. I coached juniors in Sydney, I was, and every week I go and I'm watching the game before, and there's just coaches abusing young referees, you know, and really out of line. And the referees never seem to get backed up by, well, in New South Wales, by our state association. And that's why young guys don't want to referee.
Mm. You know, that's really sad. You know, as you all know, I'm fairly vocal as a coach. You know, I draw the line when you know, younger people are refereeing. I try not to influence them as much as I would an older or senior referee. But again, you know, if there's a proper structure in place and there's someone there who's mentoring, you know, these young referees that can step in and you know, sanction coaches like they should be, because obviously young people are scared to pull out a card. You know, who wants to give a 30, 40-year-old man or woman a card when you're only 15 or 16? You know, it's scary. It's a scary thought. So the structure needs to provide that mentoring as part of it, which we don't do. You know, I see it, Phil, that all these young referees, and there's no one there to you know, try and advise them or help them. Sometimes they're lucky to have a more senior referee on the other side of the pool. You know, so I agree wholeheartedly. It's very intimidating. That's why we need to change the structure and actually have a proper process in place and a proper structure to support referees, because it's the toughest gig. You know, it's the hardest game in the world, I think, to officiate. You know, the rules aren't necessarily simple, and the players are fantastic at manipulating their movements and the way the game looks from the water. So it makes it very difficult. You know, but that's part, I guess, the reason some people like me are attracted to it, because, you know, you can have a lot of fun playing with people's minds.
Daniel, couple of things. Well, I want to get on to coaching, and I want to ask you about
Sure.
what you want to do in coaching, but before that, how do you rate yourself as a parent watching your own kids play and thinking back, because I had a lot to do with your parents.
Yeah.
I would say they were pretty close to the perfect water polo parents for a coach. How are you compared to them?
It depends in what sort of context. Obviously, when I'm just sitting on the side of the pool and watching, I can get pretty vocal as a spectator does. You know, I've had the privilege to be able to coach my kids from a very young age. You know, which has been a wonderful experience for me. You know, but I've never as a parent pushed my kids. Never didn't even push them to play water polo. And you know, as Foxy mentioned early in the broadcast, my wife Vanessa was an Australian swimmer, and we met at the AIS. And people used to say to us when the kids were younger, you know, why aren't they swimming? You know, they should be in the pool swimming and all those things. And we said, well, you know, they'll do what they want to do. They played soccer, you know, they played AFL, they did all these other things. Eventually, because they were around the pool so much, they end up becoming water polo players. And they were I guess lucky that they had someone who could educate them in their basic skills. So their basic skills were obviously at a quite high level from a young age. But we've never pushed them. You know, our kids have always made their own decisions. They've, you know, so we haven't been those sort of parents that you know push the barrow, push the wagon. We've been around because that's what, you know, we're water people. So, but you know, my parents, my father played water polo when he was younger at Des Moines Boys High actually, but they weren't water polo people. They were sporty sort of people, but same thing. They let me make my own decisions. They allowed me to make a decision at the age of 15 when I was offered a scholarship to the AIS to leave home and go down to the AIS. You know, for a parent, like I think of that now as a parent, and that's a horrendous decision to allow your child to make. You know, I chose to go. So I mean, you know, so I turned 16, I think, about a month before I went down, and spent 17 years in Canberra. You know, so yeah, you're correct. I mean, my parents were absolutely wonderful. They, you know, they supported me. My mum even worked a second job to help pay for me to you know, compete and play. My dad and my mum always helped out at the pool. My dad was actually the treasurer of New South Wales Water Polo for a number of years. You know, to help the sport and all those sort of things. So yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. They were amazing parents of athletes. Me, yeah. I mean, you can ask my kids that question, I guess. But yeah, mate. You know, I have my positives as well as my negatives, and I'll wear them both proudly.
Yeah, I asked your daughter at a training camp about you, and she said, "Yeah, he's taught me a lot, but I know more now." So, yeah, and she thinks she's a better coach. I want to get on to coaching. So you've coached plenty of National League teams, and I know you've put your hand up to coach Australian junior teams, but you've never got the job. Are you still interested?
Oh, I think so. My view, I guess, is if the environment's right and the mandate's there to get the team and the players at a level they need to be at without any sort of roadblocks, I'd definitely be interested. So, you know, I mean, I love, as you know, I love the game. I love playing it. I really get a kick out of coaching and instilling the belief in players that they are, you know, they can do amazing things. And I've been lucky enough to have, you know, to coach some pretty great teams and get some fantastic results. So, you know, it's something I'll probably do until I can't, and one way or another. And certainly, if the opportunity is there, I would, you know, have a good hard think and consider it in the context that it was presented to me.
Well, I think most of the people I know that have played with you enjoy playing under you, so hopefully you do keep doing that. I was away with Dean on the weekend, and he said he loved that season that you guys won up in Queensland. So he just really enjoyed playing polo that year. So hopefully you do keep coaching and keep involved. But I guess my question is, where do you kind of see water polo at the moment? From an international level, like how do you see the game being played there? And then at a more local level, how do you kind of see Australian water polo and fitting into that international stage?
Again, we got some fantastic players, across the board in the men's and the women's programs. The sad part is I think we lose a lot of brilliant players because of the current system and structure, because it's so black and white. You need to turn up at 5 a.m. to this training session at an institute or academy, or you're not part of the program. Now that's not possible for a lot of athletes, and then coming through the ranks, the poor parents of athletes have to have fairly significant funds to support their children, and I've experienced that. It costs a lot of money to provide them with the opportunities, which is really tough. And then you lose, I think, a lot of talent that potentially could be world class along the way. And then when you get to the national team, same thing happens. You have a look at most national teams over the past 30 years have had players retire before their time, and at the peak of their careers, they're retiring. That's just insane. We're lucky to have a few players over the age of 30 in our Olympic teams, which is crazy. You have a look at the teams that perform the best at the Olympic Games. The majority of the team, are well into their late 20s, early 30s, and have played multiple Olympic Games. We still select athletes in our Olympic teams that are only going to play in one Olympic Games. And I don't take anything away from those athletes, because they've done the work and those sort of things. But my view is, if there's an athlete who we think can play in 3-4 Olympic Games, get them in early. I was around the national team back in the late 80s before the 88 Olympic Games, and I can tell you, players like Mark Oberman, Paul Oberman, and myself were more than competitive against guys who went away in that Olympic team. Now, if we had had that experience before going to 92, maybe the 92 result would have been different. Maybe even the 88 result would have been different. It's just, I think it makes a massive difference. And we've got to start to look at how we can support our athletes so they can continue in our game for the longevity they need to be. And the women's no different. Women are retiring at the age of 20, 21, 22. Crazy.
Right. If you were in a position of power at Water Polo Australia, what changes would you make to enable that, and then to also bring the next sort of wave through? Or what key changes would you make?
I think, there needs to be guidance, and most people would agree, and I think there's been an effort to try and provide this over the years, but you always, hit these roadblocks at the state level and sometimes the club level. There needs to be a streamlined strategy and support mechanism from the top right through to the bottom. Our states need to focus on what their role is, and their role is to provide the environment for people to participate in water polo. So with that in vain, our state bodies need to see themselves as event managers. They're not an association that needs to operate like its own separate entity. They need to be given strategy and guidance from the national body to use the limited resources they have to provide those experiences to the participants. Pair that with getting the competition structure right, and these other structures to get better coaches, better referees into the system and structure. I think then we'd have one of the best water polo environments in the world. And you know, it's hard decisions have to be made. You know, people have to, you know, unfortunately bite the bullet and say, we can't continue to do what we've always done, because, you know, we're going backwards at a rapid rate doing that.
Okay, Daniel, as usual, time's beating us. So this marks the end normally when we ask you your opinion on players and coaches and venues, etc. The best player Australian that you have seen?
That's hard because you know, I've been blessed to have played with some magnificent players, and their, you know, their abilities, you know, were in different areas. Andrew Whiteman, if I had to pick someone, was probably my most favourite player ever. You know, and those who knew Andrew Bam Bam Whiteman, he was I think just on 6 foot or maybe even under 6 foot tall. He was a nuggety, hairy sort of a guy who you would not, chunky legs, would not have picked him as a water polo player. Yet his brain and his ability to make things happen and move the ball and give the pass right on the hand when it was needed was just incredible. You know, probably the most fun I ever had was playing with Andrew, because I knew I could do anything, and I'd pop up and the ball would be on my hand, I could score a goal. Magnificent, you know. But, you know, then again, you know, players like Jeff Clark, you know, unrivaled in my view as a centre forward. You know, incredibly fast, big, strong, left-hander, amazing, you know. And then I could go on with Aussie players. And I know you're probably going to ask me, you know, internationally, but I never really had any inkling of idolising an international player ever in my career. I always saw them as the enemy. So I always looked at their faults. So every international player that I ever saw, ever played against, I always looked at what their weaknesses were, because that's how I was going to manipulate them. So I don't have any international players. I've only ever idolised and put up on a pedestal blokes that I saw day in, day out, and knew how they you know, played in the environment that I love playing in. That's Australia.
Best coach?
That's a tough one, because I've got a number of you sitting there looking at me. I've been coached by John. I've been coached by Phil. And I've been coached by you, Minnie. But I mean, I've always you know, got the best out of. It took the best out of all the coaches I've been involved. The coaches I enjoyed were coaches like Ian, you and Phil, who actually you know, make the players believe that they can do, you know, anything, and you know, they there's no limits on what they should be able to do in the game. You know, probably at the top end. Dennis Pocek was a different kind of Hungarian. You know, he was quiet, you know, but he knew how to understand and manage players and talk to them in a way that got the best out of them. So, you know, while you know, I valued the way that he spoke to everyone. You know, he again was that kind of mentality. So, you know, we need more. I think we need more coaches in Australia who believe in the talent and the player pool that we have here, and talk to players in a way that makes them feel like they're invincible.
Okay, what's your favourite venue to play in?
Dorney Bars, mate.
Of course.
When you grow up as a kid, you know, and you can jump in a pool any time of the day with a ball and have a shot and have a wrestle with your mates. You know, it's the ideal environment. And when you, as a kid, learn your trade playing the game we all love, no rules, pairs, and you can get someone put their feet on your shoulders and push your knee deep into the mud when you've run out of breath. you can't beat that. So, yeah, hands down, Dorney Bars.
Don't forget the sausage sandwich.
Yeah, and where else can a referee stand on the sideline and have a beer poured on his head from above?
Absolutely.
You know, what a great venue.
How about the best Australian referee you've seen over the years?
Yeah, I mean, that's hard. I think it's hard because, you know, I think it's been mentioned a number of times where consistency is really, really tough. So, and probably the most consistent referee for me back in the day was probably John Whitehouse. You know, and he'll probably be shocked, but you know, the way referee you could pick as a player nearly every game. Whether he was the best referee, you know, that's probably debatable. But the consistency was there when he was at his peak, and I think, you know, he was rewarded by being given an Olympic final because of that consistency in the way he refereed, and obviously because I think both teams believe that he couldn't be bought. So, you know, for my mind, it's that consistency. The best compliment I think you can pay a referee is that they didn't have an impact on the game. You know, and you didn't even know that they were refereeing. I think that's the best compliment you can pay a referee, because it means they've done their job. They haven't influenced the outcome of the game. You know, and you've been able, as a player and as a coach, you've been able to ply your trade, you know, in a consistent and effective way.
Well, Daniel, that just about takes us out, and your insight into water polo is truly fascinating, and we do appreciate your time. It's been a terrific insight into everything that's happening in the game. It's fantastic. Really enjoyed it, and thanks a lot.
No, mate, my pleasure. Good to catch up.
Absolutely. There he was, Daniel Marsden. And gentlemen, that just about takes us out, as I said. Phil, Danny, Foxy, James, Scotty back in the bunker. Thank you, gentlemen, all for your time tonight. It's been good. Absolutely fascinating, I thought, with Daniel. And the next time we meet will be on August the 24th. That's a Monday, obviously. And our special guest will be Pat Jones. And you'll hear a lot more about that in the meantime. In the meantime, yes, that's it for The Whistleblower. We'll see you then.
Thank you.